friends. So a bit of an exciting update from the end of last week. Some of the packaging samples have arrived for the skincare brand. So I thought I would share them with you. I don't think I'm going to go ahead with either, but why I'm not going ahead with them is kind of interesting. So both of these are what's called airless packaging, and airless packaging is the kind that means that it, like, literally nothing from the outside can get in, like no air can get in, as the name kind of suggests, which makes the product itself way more stable, but also way more hygienic. The other advantage from a consumer perspective is that you can get like 99% of the product out without having to crack it open and stick a Q-tip in it and all those sorts of things, because it uses the pressure to actually squeeze every last bit out. So this is the one that I was most excited about. This part of the casing is aluminum, and then this is plastic. This means that you can actually refill the whole thing. So this is a pump. Now, the reason I'm not super excited about it is for two reasons. One is because this feels a lot more lightweight than it looks. Just for context as well, the whole thing can be customized. So it can be brushed, it can be matte, it can be shiny, it can be whatever you want it to be. You can engrave the top of it, which I thought was quite nice. But also, because it has an aluminum casing, it can be recycled. The outside of it can be recycled, the inside can't. Now, this whole thing is recyclable. Is refillable. Now this is the refill. Now this whole thing feels a lot lighter weight than you would imagine, or at least than I imagined. It makes sense when you think it's made out of aluminum, and so are soda cans, for example. It weighs less than the soda can. It's very lightweight, which feels to me to be kind of cheap and not that nice. The other thing is that when you are refilling it, so you keep using the pump, you keep using the lid, you keep using this little ring part, and just this part is what you refill. So you keep buying new versions of that. I filled this one with water to see what it would feel like when it had something in it. Now, the problem is that this little ring part that sits on top of it feels insanely flimsy. Like, this is aluminum, but it feels like nothing. Because it's so thin as well, it's actually already warped. I don't know if you can see that, just from me trying to like take it out and put it in and see what that experience was like. So when I go to put all this back together, you can see what I mean. It's like, it's just fiddly, it's not very nice. Like, admittedly, you only have to do that once every few months, but it just doesn't feel very nice, and I think I want my products to feel nice. The other one is this little bad boy. Now this is quite interesting because the whole thing is plastic, but it's recyclable, post-consumer recycled plastic. Also, it's one kind of plastic. The entire thing is one kind of plastic. And that's really important because it means that there's not any difficulty with regards to recycling. You can just chuck the whole thing in the recycling and it will be recyclable, 100% recyclable. As opposed to a lot of other products that have pumps and things in them that have like a metal spring or whatever it is, or they're made out of different sorts of material. You actually have to be able to separate them out. For example, the one that I just showed you. This can be refilled. So normally this is attached and you can actually like buy refills and just click them back in. This is really lovely from that perspective. It feels substantial, like it weighs more than the other one. It like feels kind of secure and significant. Also, the dosage, like the amount that you get out, can actually be customized. They both can, but this can be customized. It's also kind of just like quite a hygienic experience. Like, you squeeze this down, a little bit comes out, you can take it off. So I do really like this. That said, I feel like this one looks a little bit cute rather than beautiful. Also, when it comes to traveling, this is going to be a pain in the butt to travel with. Like, it's not going to fit neatly in a overnight bag, a toiletries bag, wet pack, anything like that. So yeah, in short, I think I'm kind of back to the drawing board on packaging. So that's going to be a project for this week. I've already got some other suppliers that I know of who I've seen some really beautiful stuff from. So going to be reaching out to them and talking to them. I've spoken to my chemist about it. She has confirmed that the airless approach is absolutely the way to go, but that's my project for this week. Anyway, I'll see you in a bit. Hey, so in my last video last week, I mentioned that I have somehow already closed my friends and family funding round for the laundry concept, and I promised you that I would tell you how I did it because it happened very quickly in less than a week. And I wish that I had this amazing formula for you, but here's essentially what happened. I had done a lot of legwork. I had put together a very comprehensive pitch deck, and I also had a very, very detailed model. Like, the financial model has more than 8 tabs. It is very well researched and very rigorously put together. Now, I sent this to a handful of friends who I have known for everything from a few years to a few decades, who I really trust, who know what they are doing in this space. Like, they are used to being able to validate businesses in some form, or they work in finance or something along those lines, so they kind of know what they're looking at. And I asked them for their guidance and their feedback, but also sought to gauge their interest in investing in a business. And I went out to about 8 people, and what happened is that way more of them than I'd anticipated offered to write me a check. Now, I am incredibly grateful that I have friends that are in a position to be able to help like this, but I think really importantly, it speaks to the story that I have, like the actual narrative around why this brand is existing and what it's doing, but also the business model and the amount of research that I put in and all those sorts of things. What I thought would be helpful though is if I actually talk you through the financial model in a little bit of detail. It is incredibly comprehensive, but I wanted to take you through 2 key components of it, and at least the initial thing that I put together that I built everything else off, so you can see what that looks like. Now, I'm not going to give you all of the numbers because I don't think we're at that point in our relationship yet, but I will give you all of the categories and tell you how I'm thinking about it. So let's go. Okay, so as promised, this is a blank template, but this is kind of the original, it was what became the dashboard, but these are the original assumptions that I put together as I was researching this, that everything else got built off. So yeah, first up, where are we getting the money from? Now, I want to trial the idea of having both a monthly membership and an annual membership. Now, I don't know how many people there will actually be in this membership or what the price point will be, but I had to kind of put figures in there. And the way I've thought about this is that I've gone to other laundry services that provide like some sort of like capped price service, and I looked at how much they were charging. What I also did was then went and looked at all of the papers that exist out there and all of the data that's out there around how much people spend on getting their laundry done, average laundry sizes, and all those sorts of things. And I came up with like dollar figures for both of these. Then, as you'll remember, I have seen more than 60 laundromats in Manhattan and Brooklyn, so in the New York area. And what I did was actually documented the price per pound that they charge for pickup and then for delivery if they were different. And I documented all of those, and then I created an average and actually understood what the spread was, what the mean was, all of these sorts of things. And then I came up with numbers that I thought I could reasonably charge for both of these. I also looked at, again, third-party data when it came to the average prices for each of these in New York in particular. With the average load size per pound of laundry, again, I looked at third-party data. It's really, really hard to gauge this, but what I was actually doing, as you'll remember, when I was doing my own research, is I sent my own laundry out a lot. And that actually gave me a sense of roughly what a 2-person household does with regards to their laundry. Now, my husband and I work out most days and obviously wear clothes every day, so we probably have a little bit more laundry than most people, but that gave me a bit of an indication as to the size as well. So taking into account those different data points, I came up with like an average load size. When it then came to the number of washers and the number of dryers, again, every single laundromat that I went to, I documented the number of washers and dryers that they had. I also had third parties, so I've been speaking with consultants and contractors who specialize in laundromats, and they have told me roughly the amount of machines that I should expect to have per the size of space depending upon the square footage of a physical space. So this allowed me to come up with kind of a number of washers and dryers that I would be comfortable with. Ultimately, I actually ended up reverse engineering this as well, because it comes down to the amount of money that I'm prepared to ultimately spend on the machines. So that was how I arrived at these numbers. Then I looked at the average number of hours I would be open per day. Again, all of the ones that I went out there and looked at, plus speaking with the consultants about how long they are typically open, I came up with a number that I was comfortable with, the days per week that I was going to be open and the weeks per year I was going to be open. And then I calculated how many cycles per hour the machines would be doing. Now, this does depend on the type of machine that you have, but it was kind of good to give me an average. Again, I looked at all of the different ones that were out there in the market and what they can do, and then kind of came up with an average. So then off that, I can work with when this is a rudimentary little model, I would figure out like what the utilization of those machines would be. Now, obviously they're not going to be running at 100% capacity. They're not going to be running constantly every hour that the business is open, because that's obviously not possible. You need to take laundry out and put laundry back in. But what percentage of utilization would be doable? This allowed me to ultimately model what it would be like if it was only a quarter utilized all the way through to, let's say, 90% utilized. Like I could see all different variations in there. I also then calculated off that the average pickup order value and the average delivery order value. Now, the reason these two figures were important is because the information that I got from speaking to all those third parties who already work in the industry is that these two things can be different. If people have a lot of laundry, they're actually more likely to get someone to like pick it up and deliver it rather than taking it themselves. Kind of makes sense, but it is important to separate the two, particularly because if I'm going to be charging a different price, a delivery price per pound, and absorbing the cost of delivery, then I need to understand what that looks like. So off all of that, I was able to calculate then the number of loads that would be run per month. If I'm open a certain number of days a week, a certain number of hours a day, a certain number of days a year, and I have a certain number of spins per hour, and based on certain utilization, the number of loads that would be run per month. Then I also took into account things like the monthly members. So how many monthly members I would have, the number of loads that they would run per month, the total number of loads that they would have altogether, then the revenue that I would be getting from those members. I did the same for annual members, taking into account their membership fees and the discounts that they receive. And then I needed to say, okay, so for everyone who's left, what are the casual loads per month based on that? So if I'm operating at, let's say, 50% utilization, and I have, let's say 20 monthly members and 20 annual members, then after their loads of laundry have been taken account of, how many do I actually have left and what's that worth to me? So through all of that, I could calculate what the revenue would be. And there's two figures in here you'll see. One is the total with discount, and one is total without discount. The with discount is the part that I'm actually going to be able to take home. The part without the discount is important because I actually wanted to understand the difference between what the revenue would be and the discount I was offering. So what that kind of gap was, but also because I was given a guideline, like a rule of thumb for determining the ultimate cost of my utilities as a percentage of revenue. So I needed to be able to calculate that off the total revenue without the discount rather than the revenue with the discount. So then we start to think about the outgoings. So if that's all the money that I get, then what am I letting go? What's going out the door? The first part is a loan. So you will remember that ultimately I was planning on funding this originally using seller financing, and then I was going to fund it using a bank loan. Ultimately ended up going down the equity investment route, but I did have a loan amount in here. So the loan amount to cover the build out costs, plus the interest rate, plus the term in years. So this is, you can use a formula in Excel or in Google Sheets to be able to calculate what your loan repayments are of this. The next one then is the equipment. Same sort of deal. If I'm going to finance the equipment, then I need the same sort of information. Then I have my rent, I have my loan repayments from this part if I'm going to, and then my asset repayments from the equipment if that's the route that I'm going down. And then I have my utilities. Now you'll see here, as I mentioned, the utility allowance as a percentage of revenue. So I was given a percentage that is a good rule of thumb for how much I should be expecting utilities to be as a percentage of my revenue. So this was calculated off the total revenue without a discount cell. And then we get into wages. So there's a service wage, so an hourly service wage, and then I wanted to have the staff required on duty excluding an operator, because I'm going to have an operator. So the reason there's gaps in here is because I wanted to calculate as I scaled up. So initially I won't need as many people because I'm not expecting the business to be totally full from day one. So I won't need as many staff, but I want to step that up over time. So I wanted to be able to build that into my model. So here I was able to say, having 3 staff, 4 staff, 5 staff, or whatever it was. And then the next one is an operator wage annually. I don't expect that I'm going to be working in the business full time on an ongoing basis. I want to be able to afford an operator, so I needed to be able to account for that. And then I have an insurance line item, pretty obvious and pretty essential. Supplies, so things like the actual laundry, liquid, and so on and so forth. And from that, I wanted to be able to calculate a cost per wash and a cost per dry in total to come up with a cost per load for as far as the supplies were concerned. Then we have a line item for the servicing of machines, a line item for marketing, a line item for software. So software covering everything from email through to software to actually run the business, to be able to handle the point of sale and all those sorts of things. Payment processing, pretty obvious, also pretty essential. The number of delivery orders per month. Now this is obviously an estimate, but the reason this is important is because I plan to absorb the cost of delivery. So if I have the number of delivery orders per month, I can then calculate, and I have the cost per delivery, then I can calculate what my delivery costs are per month. And from that, I get my total outgoings. With the total outgoings less the total revenue, I can calculate the monthly profit. I then also just had some notes in here for myself as I was going along around setup costs. So obviously setup before any of this goes into play is stuff like the formation stuff. So like admin, legal fees, all those sorts of things, along with design fees, potentially some pre-launch marketing, although theoretically you could say that that counts as part of the business cost, and any incidentals. And so then I came up with my total setup. So that was how I was like documenting and thinking through all of the research as I was going together, when I was just getting very early ideas as to whether or not this was actually something that I wanted to go ahead with before I then turned it into a whole model and everything else. And then just quickly, I also wanted to show you then, I built this into full income statements and all these sorts of things, but I also wanted to show you just what this looks like when you start to think about it in terms of a long-term plan. Now, again, this is a blank one, so we're not at that point in our relationship, but I wanted to show you what this looks like. So as far as the income statement goes, this one is actually grouped by like the whole business rather than by business line item, which I've also done as well. So the first one is around just the base laundry revenue, what that looks like year 1, year 2, year 3. And these columns allow me to populate what growth, like what increase I expect these to have between years, so I can calculate these fields and toggle these later. The next one is around merch. So what my merch might look like. And obviously I ultimately expect to build this into a laundry care like brand. So this is a line item that accounts for the revenue that I'm expecting to get from my laundry care items. So same sort of thing then, that's just mirrored when it comes to costs of goods sold. So for each of those line items, from that I'm able to calculate the gross margin and the gross margin percentage. Then I have my expenses. This shows what these look like from year 1, 2, and 3. And from all of that, I can calculate my EBITDA and my margin. So that's how I'm thinking about these things, and this is the sort of detail that I go to when it comes to financial modeling, and the kind of thing that's expected, I think, if you want to go and raise any sort of money. As you can see from all of these tabs down here, there's a lot more options in here. I'm not ready to show those to people yet, so you'll have to forgive me, but I think this gives you a little bit of a sense of what you need to do. I hope that is helpful for someone out there, but feel free to let me know if I can answer any questions, or if you have any more, if you want any more detail about how you actually go about putting these sorts of things together.
Just so you know, I have actually bought a tripod, it just hasn't arrived yet, and yeah, here we are. Anyway, I am super frustrated at the moment because, as I mentioned in my last video, I am working through new names for the SPF adjacent skincare brand. And essentially what I did was took the names that I showed you, plus some others, and I spoke to a bunch of friends, colleagues, and so on and so forth, who are brand strategists, people who are passionate about the skincare space, and then some like rogue third parties who have absolutely nothing to do with the category, don't have experience in like brand strategy, creative strategy, those sorts of things. And then I also took the names, like the shortlist, to my focus group. And from all those conversations, I came up with a shorter shortlist, like a list of finalists. And I sent those to my trademark lawyer. Now, the leading contender after all of that was Sub Rosa. And I admittedly didn't love this name from the get-go, but it really grew on me as I started to talk to people about it. And then I found out that I actually can't use the name Sub Rosa because there is already an existing trademark in the same class that is slightly different. It is Sub Rosa and then a modifier. Now, the name Sub Rosa is Latin and it quite literally translates as under the rose, but what it means is like in confidence or in secret. So I thought it was a really nice name for the brand. It has a little bit of lore to it. It sounds kind of interesting. It's kind of a beautiful name, which makes sense for the category. And it's not too like gender skewed or anything like that. The problem, of course, is that I can't use it. And if I'm going to use it, I have to use it with a non-descriptive modifier. Now, for those of you playing at home, a descriptive modifier is something that like says what it does. So say, for example, Sub Rosa Skin. I can't use that. Or the Sub Rosa, or Sub Rosa New York. I can't use any of those. It has to be a third word that is like fanciful. So it's actually part of the name. So say, for example, Sub Rosa Files or Sub Rosa Protocol. Now, I was kind of almost selling myself on one of these, but realistically, I think that it is kind of confusing to people. It doesn't have the same like short punchiness of Sub Rosa, and it doesn't carry the same kind of weight. It starts to get difficult for people to hear and then difficult for them to remember. There's a lot of potential for misspelling, all of these sorts of things. So I'm not really sure that I should actually be going ahead with that name. The next one on the list that tested really well, but I frankly really don't like, is Off-Label. Now, Off-Label, I think it really works for now because it is literally what the product is. Like, I'm going to be using ingredients that have been tested and have been proven for use for different things. They just haven't been approved for this specific use. So say, for example, Ozempic is another example of a drug or like an ingredient that is used off-label. And I think that it's kind of clever and there's potential to create kind of a real brand around that. My concern is that it's quite limiting because if the FDA change regulations like tomorrow, then suddenly the ingredients that I'm using are on label. And because off label is used so widely and has such a distinct understanding and meaning already, I'm worried that this will just be confusing for people rather than being kind of clever. I also think that it doesn't really have any potential for like lore and for, you know, interesting kind of history to the name. It just sort of sounds like it is what it says on the can, which feels a little bit functional. And now I'm not sure what to do. The agency that I'm working with on the naming still really believe in the name off-label. I frankly don't. I think that the rationale behind it feels like post-rationalization rather than real strategy. And I'm not really sure where to go from here. There are still some other names in play, but I kind of feel like everyone's talked me out of them, and I really, really wanted to move ahead with a name that I genuinely love and believe in, not just one that tested well, if you see what I mean. So unfortunately, time ticks on and I really need to solve this problem so I can keep moving. There are some things that are being held up by this that I kind of can't move ahead with until I've got it sorted. So yeah. Anyway, this vlog has been a short one because it's a short week, and I found that people didn't come back from the Labor Day long weekend as quickly as I thought they would. School started for a lot of kids this week, so I guess that also affects it. I didn't get second packaging samples this week that I'd anticipated, and I didn't get to go and see any more spaces for the laundry concept that I was expecting to get to go and see this week. I do have a viewing scheduled for next week, but I did actually also progress with the space that I showed you last week that I was really excited about. I've started to put together a proposal with my broker, so hopefully that will go to the landlord next week, which is really exciting. I've also had to work through actually building a deck, like a version of the deck that I used for the funding raising with this. So that's been quite interesting to like figure out how to shift it and to think about what a landlord might want to see rather than what an investor might want to see, because they are similar but actually quite different. So I've been working through that. So yeah, next week, like I said, actually got a viewing booked to go and see another space. I really need to get to the bottom of this name thing for the skincare brand, because so much is being held up and it's really crap, because I don't want to make a decision that I'm going to later regret, because I didn't kind of take the time and I just let people kind of rush me into a decision and make a choice that I don't want to make, particularly when I feel like they haven't thought things through, because a lot of people who really want to help don't actually think things through. They just go with a gut reaction, or they decide something, then they try and sell it to you, and I don't want to fall victim to that. Next week, I'm actually also going to see the next round of creative work on the laundry concept, Dirtbag, which is super exciting. I can't wait to see where that has gotten to. Yeah, so that's me at the moment. I'm also fully expecting to get packaging samples next week. So big week next week. This week has been a very frustrating one, but yeah, hoping that you guys will get to see a bit more stuff next week and not a lot of me sitting in various places in my apartment and in my office just having a chat with you. Anyway, till next week, enjoy, bye.